Laika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, to address you. Minister Johnson.
Fellow colleague ministers, esteemed members of the press, persons viewing live and subsequently by other media broadcasts that follow, people of St. Martin, good morning. I would like to start this morning by apprising you, the people of St. Martin, with the following. Presently, the Junior Tourism Minister, Kira Myers, is attending the Caribbean Tourism Organization, CTO's State of Tourism Industries Conference and Youth Tourism Congress in the Bahamas. This year's theme is Rejuvenate, Recreate, Reconnect, New Directions for Caribbean Tourism. While attending, Kira chose to present the following topic: Virtual Reality and Tourism, Enticing a New Generation of Explorers. As the Junior Minister of Tourism shares her ideas and her vision for the tourism product development of our country and how we can implement virtual reality, VR, to encourage persons to visit our destination and to enhance an existing product that will surely make the visitor experience even more memorable and enjoyable. Upon her return, Kira will have an active agenda alongside my person in participating in several events and several initiatives. I am so elated to deliver on a promise that Kira was to attend the CTO, but due to the passage of Hurricane Irma, she could not last year. So I have no doubt the dynamics of Kira that she will surely represent our country well in the Bahamas as we speak. Second, update for the people of St. Martin this morning. I would like to apprise the people of St. Martin, as well as my esteemed colleagues, of my report of my recent travel to Europe. Outlined in the report is a variety of meetings, press conferences, and media interviews which I attended. The 11-page report is available for my colleagues at the Council of Ministers immediately. Point 3 of my updates for this morning. As World Tourism Day was recently observed, I would like us never to forget how important the tourism sector is for our country, as it's time we as a people activate our civic responsibility and take ownership of key initiatives, such as the recently held coastal cleanup that was held. I applaud the organizers of this event, and I encourage more persons to take initiatives such as this, which will only strengthen our country. At this time, I look forward to any further questions from the press, and I thank you for my opening remarks.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Greetings to all gathered here this morning, Madam Prime Minister, honorable ministers, the Department of Communications, members of the press, as well as the listening and viewing audiences via radio, television, and social media. Good morning, Sualiga. Friday, October 5th, is celebrated worldwide as International Teachers' Day. I hope that our teachers are enjoying their midterm break this week and that they will be showered with good wishes and tokens of appreciation from their students and from the community. The Department of Education will be hosting an event to celebrate and honor our teachers later during this month. On behalf of the entire Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, I thank you, teachers, for all the work that you have done. You have answered a call to a most noble profession. As you continue to serve as parent, counselor, nurse, mentor, cheerleader, mediator, handwriting expert, organizer, fundraiser, and the list goes on and on. We thank you, teachers, for the personal sacrifices that you make to build the next generation of leaders. You are the builders of the country's future. Your impact goes beyond your classroom and touches the society and ultimately the universe. Teachers, we salute you. Yesterday, I signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the University of Curaçao for the immediate commencement of the law program on St. Martin via the University of St. Martin. This was possible because the Council of Ministers approved the program and the Minister of Finance signed to the release of 1 million guilders for the program's funding. The classes will be streamlined live from Curaçao to students in St. Martin, and some classes will also be pre-recorded and sent to students here as well. In some cases, the professors will travel to St. Martin to give classes in person and work with local students when they have specific assignments. The law program will last 4 to 5 years at the cost of $3,000 per year for each student, and the commencement of this law program through the University of St. Martin meets a target under the governing program 2018-2022, in which USM becomes the nucleus for national and international development. The Student Support Services Division will be hosting a workshop entitled My PBL, or PBL, PKL, PKL, and TKL, TKL Education, and beyond. This workshop is geared towards helping our students understand what opportunities they have after completing vocational secondary education and training on St. Martin. In case you're wondering what these abbreviations mean, let me explain. They are abbreviations of Dutch words that are used to describe various pathways or educational routes in vocational education and training. And it is amazing to see how easily English-speaking students and parents and teachers utilize the Dutch pronunciation when making reference to these various pathways. Just for your information, the PBL, Praktische Basis Leerweg, means Basic Vocational Pathway. The PKL means Praktische Kader Leerweg, Practical Vocational Pathway. And the TKL, Theoretische Kader Leerweg, Theoretical Vocational Pathway. This workshop that's going to be given is a free workshop, and it will be held on October 4th, 2018 at the Student Support Services Division from 5:15 p.m. to 6:45 p.m. For many students or graduates of the VSBO or PSVE, meaning Preparatory Secondary Vocational Education, and the various pathways, PBL, PKL, and TKL, the question of what is next after their education often poses a challenge. With this workshop, the Student Support Services Division is aiming to show these students that there are many study and educational opportunities for them after they complete their particular form of secondary vocational education and training. This workshop is open to students in the last 2 years of the PBL, PKL, and TKL, or to students who recently graduated from any one of these pathways. The Student Support Services Division office is located in the Amigo building across from the police station next to the Windward Islands Bank. The Student Support Services Division also postponed the Return to Happiness Facilitators training to allow more persons in the community who are interested in volunteering to register for this training. Return to Happiness is a psychosocial recovery program for children who have experienced natural disasters, conflicts, or violence, where children are usually most affected. The goal of the Return to Happiness program is to create such opportunities for children ages 5 to 12 who have experienced a natural or man-made disaster, to enable them to process these experiences through a series of guided play activities for the purpose of reducing their post-disaster anxieties and to help them to reestablish their sense of joy, happiness, security, and confidence in adult protection. Persons interested in volunteering as a facilitator for the Return to Happiness program should contact the Student Support Services Division at 543-123-5 for an application package. Last Thursday, the ordinance on study financing was unanimously approved by the House of Parliament. This was a historic moment for this ministry. In the first place, it is the first ordinance submitted to Parliament by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, which has now been approved. In the second place, this ordinance has been a work in progress since 1995. One may wonder, why did it take 23 years to get a law passed? Allow me to share with you a brief historical journey of the Study Financing Ordinance. Much of the information comes from Mr. Antonio Aventurin, head of the Division Study Financing. But the synopsis shows how long it takes and the tedious process involved in getting a law from a draft to being passed in Parliament. Let's start. 1995, the draft island regulation on study financing was approved by the then Island Council of St. Martin. 1996, Prime Minister and Governor of the Netherlands Antilles refused to approve and sign the island regulation on study financing because St. Martin had no authority to contract loans based on the island regulation of the Netherlands Antilles. At that time, only Curaçao could contract loans as part of the Netherlands Antilles. The contention was, if St. Martin cannot contract any loans, it also cannot issue loans. Because in truth and in fact, study financing is partially a loan system. For the next 14 years, there was no progress. In 2009-2010, the first version of the Study Financing Ordinance was drafted, but unfortunately, it didn't get included in the package of legislation moving from the island territory to country, St. Martin. As per 10-10-10, a national ordinance dating from the 1960s entitled Landsstudie Toelage Regeling became the applicable policy on study financing. In 2011-2012, a second version was drafted because the first draft had to be rewritten in accordance with the new format for laws, as established by the legal department of St. Martin. This version didn't pass the legislative screening process. In 2014-2015, there was a version 3. A consultant was hired to rewrite the law in accordance with the comments from the legal department. Unfortunately, version 3 failed the legislative screening process as well. 2015, version 4. Another consultant was hired to make the final changes as requested by the legal department. 2015-2016, version 5. Yet another consultant was hired to complete the process. Again, the legal department rejected the ordinance because the law was deemed discriminatory, because not all citizens were eligible for study financing. The law was based on the study financing legislation in the Netherlands, where everyone is eligible for funding once you attend school. 2016-2017, version 6. It was decided that the law had to be completely rewritten and reworded from scratch. In the end, this version was also rejected by the legal department. The study financing ordinance failed the legislative screening process for the 7th time. Finally, in 2018, The draft legislation was approved by the Council of Ministers, and subsequently it was sent to the governor, who then submitted it to Parliament for approval. It has been indeed a lengthy process. This legislation has passed through many hands, offices, and departments. I would like to thank all the members of the staff of the Department of Education, the Division Study Financing, as well as past commissioners of education and my predecessors for persevering and staying with the task until we are all able to accomplish it together. We have overcome together. Also, last Thursday, the proposed members for the board of the Monument Council were approved by Parliament. Now, after Parliament's approval, the appointments still have to pass through the governor before the minister can sign off. The task of the Monument Council is to provide advice on monuments, advice on monument requests, policy and on policy matters, and advice on criteria for the designation of monuments. The Council reviews and advises on appeals by owners of monuments. In addition, the Council advises on requests for repairs, restorations, and/or demolitions of monuments. Let me give you a concrete example as to how the Council works. If, for example, a building has been listed by government as a monument, then before repairs or modifications can be done to that building, the Monument Council must be consulted. In other words, also before VROMI can issue a building permit to have repairs done to a monument, VROMI must seek advice from the Monument Council. The board of the Monument Council is officially appointed for 4 years. The tenure of the last board ran from May 2013 until May 2017, which means that for approximately a year and a half, St. Martin has been without a monument council. Hopefully, we can have that monument council in place within short. Lastly, on the rights of the child. The countries in the Dutch kingdom, namely the Netherlands, Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin, as well as the Dutch public entities Bonaire, Sint Eustatius, and Saba, have been working together on promoting the rights of the child within the kingdom. At the International Education Conference held in May 2018, the political authorities for youth and family of the 4 countries and of the 3 entities of the Caribbean in the Netherlands signed a declaration of intent to step up cooperation to improve the rights of children in the kingdom. All of the parties have agreed to formalize the cooperation in a memorandum of understanding. As you know, the rights of the child were adopted by the United Nations in their 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child. Rights are things that every child should have or should be entitled to. A few of the rights that a child has are, for example, the right to relax and to play, the right to freedom of expression, the right to be safe from violence, and, of course, the right to education. These are just but a few of the 54 rights that are enumerated in that convention. In the interests of the child and the right of every child to healthy, safe, and optimal development, and with attention for the fact that children grow and develop according to their individual nature, gender, living, and family situation, the 4 countries and the 3 public entities have established a joint vision and a joint approach to improve the rights of children within 5 years after signing the Memorandum of Understanding. The MOU has now been approved by our Council of Ministers and has been signed off by the Governor and by myself. And I've been authorized to sign that MOU on behalf of St. Martin. So within short, all the parties will come together to ratify and sign this cooperation agreement or this memorandum of understanding, thereby promoting the rights of the children in the countries and in the public entities in the Dutch Kingdom. As we face our challenges together, let us continue to work together, because we will overcome together. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Perry Heerlings, to address you. Minister Heerlings.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning to my esteemed colleagues. Good morning to the press corps. Good morning, St. Martin. This morning I would like to share with you two short announcements. First of all, I can inform the public at large that the 2019 budget is ready to be presented to the Council of Ministers, which will happen tomorrow. So we are on track with that. Then secondly, when I took up office as the Minister of Finance, I announced that I would present country St. Martin with a financial recovery plan for St. Martin. I can also announce you that that recovery plan has been completed and it's ready to be discussed also in the Council of Ministers. Then it is the idea that by next week this plan will be shared and delivered to the various stakeholders and shared with the community. The recovery plan forms also part of the discussions that will take place later this month in The Hague, because of course the Netherlands continues to be an intrinsic part of the process in getting our financial household and financial management in good order. However, I need to also mention that the first responsibility to do this lies with us, and the recovery plan also mentions that and gives us indications how we need to proceed where that is concerned, to pick up our own responsibility and to make sure that in the coming years we are moving forward to a sound financial system for our country. And then lastly, the recovery plan will also be available on the newly to be launched Facebook page of the Ministry of Finance. Hopefully that will be done by the end of this week on Friday. But we will send out a notice when it's on air. Those are the two announcements that I have for you, and I'm open for any questions that you may have. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings, for your opening remarks. The Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin, will not be making any opening statements, but is available for any questions the media may have. We now move on to the question and answer session. Stephen Cerillion of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ministers. Good morning. My question is for the Prime Minister. As the personnel of PSS move to the census building as per Thursday, one, how many of them will be taking up this new location? And two, where are you at with the downsizing negotiation at PSS at this time?
Thank you, Stephen Cerillion. The first, let me start with the last part. There are 14, according to the report that was done, the assessments that was done by Aswabe, 14 positions that were needed in the downsizing for that location for PSS. The remainders have been also, the remaining personnel has also been assessed. And this week, we are starting with interviews to try to see how we can assist them in placement. So I haven't announced anything as yet because that part hasn't been finalized, but starting as of Monday, the Personnel Affairs will be calling those individuals in for interviews to see where and if possible they can be placed in this organization.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andrew Dick of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning to the Council of Ministers. Minister Johnson, concerning the public transportation, the Bus Association met on Sunday. They asked for an audience. Any response to that?
Andrew, thank you for your question. It's good seeing you here at press briefings once again. Indeed, I know it made a daring headline yesterday morning on the front page of our media, but I know the United Bus Association, and I had a very upfront and very candid initial conversation going forward in terms of the plans and projects that we have in mind. So, of course, Andrew, it is being scheduled, the meeting with the Bus Association, by the end of this week with my office.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. We now move on to the second round of questions. Stephen Cerillion.
Mr. Johnson, you're just back from Europe. Did not specify exactly where from Europe, but a report has been compiled based on your visit or working visit to Europe. Can you give us an insight into the report as you will be making it available to the Council of Ministers as of Thursday?
Thank you, Stephen. And of course, my trip was well documented with press releases throughout the duration of the trip. The first stop, of course, was to the Netherlands. I visited the St. Martin House. Imperative of visiting the St. Martin House was establishing not only a close working relationship between the St. Martin Tourist Bureau and the St. Martin House, the Minister Plenipotentiary and the Deputy Minister Plenipotentiary, but also having them outline and understand the plans of TIAT, the plans, the objectives, and the priorities. In addition to that, while I was in the Netherlands, I met with Mr. Calvin Brooks, who is part of a young, dynamic group of individuals that indeed want to give back to St. Martin. So that initial conversation on how, via the Ministry of TIAT and via the Ministry of Plenipotentiary in The Hague, our St. Martin House, can represent and support any initiatives in that regard. Right after that, I went to Portugal for the Sea Trade Conference. The Sea Trade Conference, of course, primarily not only to meet with cruise executives, but more so to solidify St. Martin's position in home porting. At the end of November, St. Martin now will have the seaborne cruise vessel that has an accommodation of 450 passengers coming to St. Martin now for home porting. What does that mean for the destination? It means that St. Martin now positions itself once again as a leader in the cruise industry, once again as the #1 port in the Northeastern Caribbean, and further solidifies St. Martin's bounce back, getting back on track plan that I have outlined in my visits. So that was very important to do in Portugal, to solidify St. Martin's cruise position in general and what we have to offer as a product. Also, while in Portugal, I met with the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association President, Michelle Page, and how we can further strengthen our ties going forward between the destination and the association. Plans are already in place for a stakeholders meeting that Michelle and her top executives will be coming to St. Martin and meet with key persons within the tourism industry to further strengthen our connection between FCCA as well as with the destination itself, that St. Martin continues to lead in tourism. Upon my return then back from the Netherlands, I also had a press conference to give a state of affairs address and where St. Martin stood as a destination, what are the plans and priorities of the Ministry of TIAT, what are objectives and visions for the tourist office, as well as part of the panel was Mr. Olivier of the French side tourist office, the representative in Europe. Why was that important? St. Martin on an international level saw that the media took a spin in terms of everything was disaster, doom and gloom for St. Martin. 1 year and a few weeks later, St. Martin indeed is bouncing back. Our people are very resilient. So that positive press and the progress of where we are as a nation today was imperative for the wider community, especially in the Netherlands. That presentation was well received by members of the Dutch media, students that were attending, as well as other dignitaries, close to 100 persons that attended. Once I left the Netherlands, I then was en route to Topresa for the 40th anniversary of the top trade show in the French market. Why was it important to go? With the understanding of the MOU of French St. Martin, it was imperative to attend not only to support my colleagues, but be able to meet with representatives of Air France, representatives of Air Caribes, representatives of different stakeholders within the tourism industry to further strengthen St. Martin's position also in the French market. When I made a presentation to also a similar group of tourism stakeholders from the French market, they were also elated of the progress made on Dutch St. Martin. So it was a very enlightening presentation for them. The dialogue and the feedback from the French media in terms of the several interviews that were conducted was also positive for St. Martin, and it also strengthened St. Martin's position in knowing that indeed the bounce back in the recovery is underway. So the reason for the trip indeed was imperative for the destination, because out of that even came the discussion with KLM of the reduction of fares, that we have similar fares as Aruba and Curacao has for their introductory fares, starting at 499 euros, as well as the frequency of flights, and as well as St. Martin's position going forward in terms of key events like having sufficient airlift for the Heineken Regatta, the 50th anniversary of Carnival, as well as other peak times in St. Martin's calendar. So those were the reasons for the trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for that very elaborative response. Andrew Dick of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
All right, Prime Minister, concerning GEBE, Minister Gloss is not here, so maybe you can help me out with an update on the board members. What's the latest? Why isn't it taking so long concerning that?
Thank you for that question. I can answer that because just yesterday we signed off on the board being implemented. So I think all that's going to be taking place next is just a meeting so that everyone gets introduced to each other. But we just signed that off yesterday in the Council of Ministers meeting. The final part of it, because it's a process. You know, the process is it has to be vetted by the Corporate Governance Council. That was done. That took some time. And after that, then they have this part. So once it was completed, it was given to the Council of Ministers. We approved it, and now it is it has been finalized. So it's just now for them to start having meetings. But before that meeting, of course, we will have to call a shareholders meeting as the Council of Ministers with that entity.
We'll be able to get the members, Prime Minister. Who the members are?
In all honesty, right now, I can't tell you who they are. That's not my portfolio. I wish the minister was here, but nevertheless, within short, I'm sure that by next press briefing or even before that, it will be announced in the press.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the third round of questions. Stephen Cirillian, you have the floor.
Minister of ECYS, November the 11th is fast approaching. What sort of activities, if any, have the various departments, culture and sports, working on to ensure that we see a successful celebration of November 11th?
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen, for that question. As you know, November 11th, St. Martin Day, is celebrated alternatively on one year on the French side, other year on the Dutch side. And this year, it is for the French side to organize the activities. So they, from what I gather, they're busy planning and organizing, and we will be hearing. And if there's a need for input from the Department of Culture, I know the head of the Department of Culture, Ms. Clara Reyes, is always willing to assist. But this year, it's going to be celebrated on the northern part of the island.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Andrew Dick, you have the final question.
Minister Healings, concerning the draft budget 2019, what are some of the major points, especially with the recovery plan for St. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Dick, for that question. There's a lot of major points, but what becomes very clear in the 2019 budget, it is a continuation or an addition to Budget Amendment 2018, the second Budget Amendment 2018, which is being handled as we speak. The major focal point on that is that we should be able to initiate the projects that need to be done. That means that the capital investment, the capital expenditures part of the budget is one of the most important parts of it, because that would allow us to attract loans, contract loans, to be able to help and solve issues like the dump and other major projects that we need to do right now. So the 2019 we will follow up on that, and of course other parts it is mostly on the recovery end of it. It's mostly on the recovery end, and I've tried to make or facilitate my fellow ministers and the ministries to be able to do what they need to do in the coming fiscal year.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings, for your response. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018.